Hello and welcome. Thank you for stopping by and watching this video presentation. My name is Armin Kapatsche. Let me briefly introduce myself. I've been a member of the WDC Education Department now for quite some time, and I have been bringing content from the perspective of science and anatomy to the department. And I've been doing that by drawing in part on my background as a dancer, but also on my education in various somatic methods, specifically Rolfing, the Feldenkrais technique, and continuum movement. Now, the explorations in those fields have also led me to deeply study the human anatomy, and that in turn has led me to, at first, inspire and now already be part of a research project at MIT, and our working title for this project is a dance-inspired investigation of human movement at the Daniel Lab, MIT. The title of this presentation is Time to Reflect, and this was conceived of by our wonderful leader of the department, Miss Vibeke Toft. And she asked us to share with you some either experiences or resources like books and videos that we have found useful and inspirational in our journey to where we are now. And I thought, well, I just know exactly which milestones to share with you, which have brought me to this role nowadays, where I find myself, in a way, being a translator, bringing science to the world of dance, but also bringing dance and art to the world of science. Now, the first milestone that I came across was literally just handed to me, like early on when I arrived here in America, in the form of a book. The title of the book is The Thinking Body by Mabel E. Todd. And this book was originally published already in 1937, and quite surprisingly, I must say, even by today's standards of science, this is still a classic in the study of human physiology. But not only that, it very beautifully describes how our thinking and how our emotions influence human movement. This book has been a great inspiration to many famous people, also famous dancers, and I've heard Richard Cleave talk very highly about this book, and also Bill and Bobby Irvine. Now, to my biggest surprise in learning about this book was when I found out that Marilyn Monroe actually used the principles of this book to craft this character that we have come to know as Marilyn Monroe. And here's a little movie excerpt from a movie called Love, Marilyn, in which a friend of hers, Alan Burstyn, talks about this.
Get out the fire hose.
In the film Niagara, they had that one shot of her walking away from camera, and her derriere is just doing the most miraculous sexual things. And I think it was that moment that kind of everybody went, what? What are we looking at here? Nobody had ever seen anybody walk like that on camera before. She created it, and she created her whole persona. This was Marilyn's book. This book is called The Thinking Body. It's about the breath and the skeletal structure. From this, she got her way of talking and her way of walking. This is the book that she created herself out of. There's an exercise in there to walk as though there's a string coming out of the top of your head, and it's attached to a cloud. And you walk like you're hanging from a cloud. I mean, it does something to your body when you do that.
We were walking down the street one day, and she said, "Do you want to see me be her?" I had no idea what she meant. And I said, "Sure." And suddenly she did something. I'm telling you, like she turned on a light bulb, and suddenly people were going, "Oh my God, that's Marilyn Monroe. Oh, isn't that Marilyn Monroe?" We had to jump into a taxi to get away because people started running after her.
So the second milestone I want to talk about is not a book, but it was more of an event. I accidentally again got introduced to a body work method or method of realigning the human body called Rolfing or structural integration. Now this was really simply a life-altering experience for me and truly set me into this path of anatomy and science. There is a wonderful book written by Ida Rolf, and the title is Re-establishing the Natural Alignment and Structural Integration of the Human Body for Vitality and Well-Being. Now, it's a great read, very informative, but I once again have found a video. Now, be forewarned, the quality is really bad. It's an old video with an interview of the very late Ida Rolf. I think it's very inspiring to see this lady, how smart, bright, and the grit that is inside of this lady. And I can truly say, if it wasn't for her, none of all of this research nowadays into fascia and how fascia is really the organ of structure in the human body would probably have never happened.
In structural integration, we expect to give a cycle of 10 sessions. There is a reason for this. We are not dealing with local problems. We are not dealing with the kind of thing that you can say, well, I fixed that, that's all. We are dealing with an attempt to make a body a sturdier human being, to make a body more secure, more adequate within the field of gravity. Now this requires that muscles be balanced. They need to be balanced around a vertical line. And when I talk about balancing muscles, I'm talking about balancing the right side against the left side, about balancing the front of the body against the back of the body, and finally about balancing the innermost muscles against the outermost muscles, the inside against the outside. This is the most important of those balances. Bodies carry their history written within them. In the event of accidents, and sometimes quite minor accidents, little Johnny falls, and Mama looks him over and he's still operational. And Mama tells the neighbor, we're so lucky Johnny didn't hurt himself. Nothing happened to Johnny, but actually things have happened to Johnny, and various of Johnny's muscles have been displaced slightly, so that Johnny, in continuing to move around, to run around, to climb around, is using a different muscular pattern. And that different muscular pattern places itself on top of what should be the effective muscular pattern of the uninjured body. But it all talks to the seeing eye of what has gone on to displace the muscular patterns within the body. This young lady is a model in a class in Miami, and actually sent to us by a children's clinic. She's only about 17 years old, perhaps. And you see here how the contour of her back and the contour of her abdomen display the fact that her lumbar structure is much too far anterior. As a result, she's compensating with these buttocks much too far back. Whereas at the end of 10 hours, so much of this has changed. The lumbar structure has come back. Because the lumbar structure comes back, the hip structure drops, and that buttock structure becomes much more normalized. Her neck begins to sit up on her spine, over the spine, supported by the underlying spine. Here you have the neck structure, and it makes you suspect that it's breaking. There seems to be no support below it. This is a model of two muscles designed to show how muscles work and how muscles fail to work. Many muscles cross one another. Others lie adjacent to each other. When a myofascial structure is injured, and this can happen in an accident Or it can happen through such a thing as a dose of flu that gets in an area where there are muscles. But at any rate, whenever a myofascial structure is injured, it secretes various semi-fluid materials which should really improve the movement of muscles, and does really while it is semi-fluid. But then it dries on, and the semi-fluid material becomes a glue. It will be a glue between the fascia, the envelope of the fascia, and the envelope of the fascia of this muscle. And that glue prevents it from really working independently. And so when this muscle is pulled, it is impeded by the glue that is sticking those two fascial envelopes together. And so when we call on this muscle for movement, what we really get is this muscle impeded by that muscle. And so there is not free movement. And so every attempt at moving that muscle requires more energy because you have to move both this muscle and that muscle. As I said before, the collagen tissue is a very special tissue. It's a very special kind of a complicated protein tissue. And it is special in the sense that by the application of energy, you can change its length and its resilience. Now, as the Rafa applies energy at this point, perhaps, and this point, at any rate, in the neighborhood of the place where the tissue is built up into something of a hard little knot, as he applies energy there, the glue seems to dissolve. And all of a sudden, he feels under his fingers that one muscle is moving on the other muscle freely, and that these two muscles can begin to operate in their respective directions, in the direction called for by their design.
Now, when you experience Rolfing as a client, but for sure when you study Rolfing as a practitioner, there's just no way around learning also about another somatic technique called the Feldenkrais method, which again has been named after its inventor or creator, Moshe Feldenkrais. Moshe Feldenkrais has written a very famous book called Awareness Through Movement, and it's I find it funny that it's called Easy to Do Exercises to Improve Your Posture, Vision, Imagination and Personal Awareness. And I'm chuckling about it because it's a very short book. It's just 40 or 50 pages. And I have asked many of my doctor and PhD friends at MIT and Harvard to read it, and they all cursed at me afterwards because despite of it being rather short in terms of pages, it's a heavy read and it takes a long time to get through it. Now, this is not meant as a discouragement for you to read this book, but rather as an encouragement, because I think it is just full of wisdom. So again, I've been digging around and I found a documentary about the Feldenkrais method, and here is a brief excerpt about it.
Feldenkrais' doctors wanted to operate. Uneasy about submitting to a controversial surgical procedure, the brilliant inventor and engineer began experimenting with biomechanics to learn new ways to move his knee. To his great delight, the pain subsided without surgery, and the Feldenkrais method was born. For several years, Feldenkrais studied anatomy and methodically examined hundreds of movements in minute detail. His success in improving his own range of motion while eliminating his pain motivated him to teach others to improve their own functioning, regardless of their current condition.
He knew so much about movement, but because of the engineering and the physics, and you look at the ergonomics and the biomechanics of how you're using your body, and then the understanding through martial arts of learning how to use yourself well, he started to realize, you know, I can work with people by teaching them through their body to go to their brain, to learn to teach their brain to be reorganized and learn to function better.
It was at this point that Feldenkrais pushed his judo training beyond the boundaries of self-defense and into the realm of self-development.
In martial arts, your ability to recover is your ability to fend off your opponent.
Feldenkrais had found his life's calling, helping his clients defend themselves from such opponents as pain, limitation, and immobility.
He started to create the understanding of the use of the body in a way that becomes efficient and using it better, and the ability to recover from an injury.
Feldenkrais often talked about the importance of living an embodied, balanced life, which he defined as one in which one is able to meet the demands of the moment. Many of his ideas were spawned from martial arts, which train the practitioner to survive in the present moment. However, Feldenkrais urged his students to adopt a mindset far beyond simple survival, that of a joyful, passionate response to life, no matter what their condition.
I think Feldenkrais believed that we really weren't living up to our potential, that we had so much potential for development, and that means not just our brain, but also our capacity to be a human being. And so he was very interested in challenging us to find out what that potential was, to push ourselves to the edges of that, and to live in that way.
And that's what he did for himself. And from there, people became curious, and of course, he had to talk about it. And so from the talking about it, it started to get shared, and he started to create these movement lessons that he called Awareness Through Movement.
And last but not least, the final milestone I would like to talk about is my opportunity to first meet and then get to know and then become friends with the wonderful Emily Conrad, the founder of Continuum Movement. Now, she too wrote a very nice book. It's called Life on Land. This one is not a how-to book, it's a biography. And she beautifully tells her story of her upbringing, her childhood in Brooklyn, then how she discovers her love for dance, and all of that leading to a terrible breakdown, both psychologically and physically. And then she simply just runs away, moves to Los Angeles, and there slowly pieces her life back together, and in that process also develops what is now known as Continuum Movement. And that is yet again another very groundbreaking somatic method of self-discovery, movement discovery, and also a healing method. I have many videos of Emily, but here are some excerpts very briefly with Emily talking about her take on human movement.
When I was a young dancer, it did not occur to me that fear is the enemy of movement. I didn't know that. Even though it might look like the fear of the dog or the fear of the robber or the fear of losing my job or my mate or fear of flying or whatever it is, it's always the fear of death. Fear narrows your life down to the littlest drop of existence. Fear is an animal response to danger. And the way that animals react is that they stop their breath in order to become invisible to other animals, because animals usually will detect through movement. And so the notion of the holding of breath and stifling of movement are one and the same. So that, and again, these are degrees. So it's the degree of the holding of the breath that will lock down movement. It's pretty interesting to see that when someone is in shock, either from some kind of traumatic accident or some other event or whatever, their breath is locked up and their throat tightens down to keep the breath up. And so that becomes patterned into your nervous system, that breath, and that will happen very fast. Stress and shock create cortisol. It creates the release of a hormone called cortisol that locks down the fluid in our connective tissue. And it does that the way an octopus would spew black ink. It's there to numb you so that you don't feel the assault of what's taking place. It's there to protect you, really. And so as long as your breath stays like that, the fluid in the connective tissue will maintain, the cortisol will stay there, and it will create more stagnation in the fluid, and so there's a tightening of the body. So that again, let's say that somebody goes to an exercise class, they feel tight, and they say, well, gee, I better get into some exercise. Exercise is about the worst thing they can do because they're locked up like this in the first place. They go to a gym or some kind of exercise class, and again, they're putting a constraint on top of that. And so there's no give in the body in the first place. You start putting weights or start doing strenuous things with it, there's no give at all. Boom, the person has an injury and says, gee, I better, this is dangerous to my health. All the time, the shock is basically the problem. When we're in shock, the vitality is elsewhere. Now, this is me lying on my stomach, and as you look at the back, you'll see that the muscles that are moving along the spine are undulating. I can't really do this on purpose. I'm not that good. But through the activation of the fluid, the behavior of muscle now will take on a kind of biomorphic look. Biomorphic meaning resembling all life form. So we begin to dissolve our exclusive biped tendencies, and we begin to join the flux of life where form and function now become much broader, and we're encompassed in a species-inclusive activity. Here again, I'm lying on my stomach, and if you look at the sides of the body, the breathing is coming from the side. This is a more aquatic way of breathing. So lateral breathing and lateral movement are much more, belong much more to our oceanic origins. Breathing changes as we move on land. Here we're looking at the movement of skin, which is not what we usually will see in a biped. It belongs to our ancient past. And again, we're seeing a movement that we can associate with amphibians. The communication begins within our own organism. If we're not able to communicate within our own organism, it limits our ability to experience. Well, if I have no capacity to experience, meaning I have to, if all my experience is external, my sense of myself becomes empty, and I become dependent on other people for recognition, for validation, for anything that goes on. I become completely outer directed, so that the sense of myself is, I'm a stranger to myself. I really don't inhabit myself.
Now, of course, there was nothing in here in any detail as in how any of this works, what exactly in detail can be learned about the anatomy. It wasn't meant to be that, it was just meant to be an inspiration. I do want to say, though, in summary, that there are great benefits to be derived from this. In short, it can definitely enhance your performance. It is wonderful for injury prevention. And it actually does a great job in stimulating one's creativity, and it truly heightens one's emotional involvement in movement or just basically anything you do. So I thought, who better to talk about some of those benefits than some of the people that I had the great pleasure to introduce this work in great detail to.
Hello, my name is Jessica. I live in New York City. I'm a ballroom dancer. I dance professional Latin with my partner. We compete in the United States and overseas. I started dancing Latin when I was 22 years old, so it's been about 4 or 5 years now. I actually think my greatest aha moment was when I realized that my cat, this one here, does all of the things in her body that my teacher is teaching me about. Like, in order to produce like this elastic, flexible, powerful kind of movement, she has like these perfect little paws that are like winged, and the way that she you know, mutates certain things in her body, and the way her spine moves, it's I really understand now, like, that, you know, she was built to move perfectly, to hunt prey, and to be fast and cunning and in her body movement, and I understand now that, you know, these elements can be present in us as well as we dance and strive for powerful, flexible movement.
My name is Rostislav Toporsky and I do 9 dance. The first thing that was difficult was the new vocabulary that's being used. So not having education in medical field, even something like flexing and extending, where it's not so much about bending and straightening. So some of those terminologies that you first have to get used to, and that probably takes the longest. I think the biggest aha moment now that I'm recalling is actually not any particular movement, but it is the size of the movement, the size of the change that could be perceived inside your body, and at first might not be as visible or sensitive to yourself, but ultimately realizing that the size of the movement that are happening inside your body are much smaller than we might think initially. And finding that out was probably the biggest thing.
Hi, my name is Alexander Chernasitov.
I'm Marina Grishanina.
And we are the World Amateur Latin finalists.
I have mine.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that was backward walks.
Backward walks was the big aha moment.
Yes. It was totally eye-opening for me, because I felt with the proper Latin technique, I felt stuck sometimes. But when I learned more about how the muscles and the bone go together, you understand and you can create a flow with that. So, and I think most of the dancers can explain forward walk, but not so much backward walk. So that was aha.
For me, I think it was about the subject of the spine, about the 3 different actions that happen, and the 2 output the 3rd one, that I don't really have to work for it as well. So that to me was very interesting, and kind of an aha moment that these things go on and this is how it works.
Hi, so my name is Alexander Vukasarevic. I've been dancing a little bit over 20 years, and I'm currently competing in professional American school division. So basically, studying this concept allowed me to learn more about functionality of my own body, which allows me to send a clear message to my partner, so therefore the partnering skill has improved, I think, dramatically. Not forcing body to move is very important and very visible on the floor. When I take the video from the competition or from the practice, it's very obvious if the movement is forced versus the movement is more organic and it flows naturally to the body. So it certainly helped with that. When you just start hearing about it, it might sound a bit overwhelming. But I think the reason for that is just simply because we don't really know what's going on there. And it's very different from the studying just dancing as in patterns and, you know, like general thing. This is so much more detailed that I think a lot of people start being afraid just hearing about it. But once you get into it, if you're focused enough, if you're really trying to understand and to to apply that in your body, I think that the benefits are, there's so many benefits of that. So therefore it kind of inspires you to keep going and keep studying and keep investing time into it.
Hi, I'm Alana Kesselman.
And I'm Tal Levshitz.
And together we dance the Latin style, and we are currently ranked second in America and world finalists.
So for me, it wasn't so much an aha moment as much as an aha feeling. Once I started, because I feel as dancers we're pretty in touch with our bodies, so once I started feeling sensations of stability that I didn't before, and just like safety and groundedness and power, once I started feeling sensations of speed or storing energy in my body to create speed, that's when I knew I was onto something and I had to learn more.
I have probably two main aha moments. Number one was when I started doing the preparation for any kind of direction change or any kind of fast rotation, and I was able to do it without feeling any kind of like pain in my back or loss of balance. So that was my number one. And number two is when before I used to get a lot of pinched nerve in my neck, and when I would do like ripples or things that are very fast, and I stopped feeling that, and now I don't get that ever. So that was my aha moments.
Thank you for watching. I hope there were some ideas in here which piqued your curiosity to look more deeply into how your own body works and how our thoughts and emotions interact with our physical being. There are many great disciplines out there. I only mentioned the ones that I happened to stumble upon and decided to take a deep dive into based on my own sense of wonder and curiosity, and quite frankly on the disbelief that nobody ever before told me about the existence of such intricate concepts. Now, I also know that many people out there will be very quick to be dismissive of such extracurricular pursuits, and maybe that is because they feel that the learning curve initially is huge. And yes, that's true. It does require investment of time and energy to learn about new concepts from a new perspective. But the payoffs are huge too. Just think about what some of your colleagues actually said. Better balance, more elasticity, more power, easier direction changes, injury prevention, and the list goes on. So who wouldn't want to have those things in their own dancing? As Emily always used to say to me, there's just no way this won't make you a better dancer. On that notion, take care. Goodbye.